everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We are putting on our film scholar cap, and we're talking about classic films today, classic rom-coms as part of our Hallmarkies ranking series that we started doing. We're going to be talking about our favorite top 12. We're going to be talking about our favorite top 12 classic rom-coms before 1960. It was a huge task. And I'm Pumpkin Rachel Wagner, and Terry's here.
Hi.
How are you feeling about this?
I'm confident. This one was a tough one. I'm confident, but I'm confident.
It was very, very tough. I came up with a short list of 39 that I shared with our patrons and gave them the chance to contribute. And so if you want to be a part of these ranking episodes, if you're listening every week and thinking, they're doing it wrong, or their rankings are wrong, you can have your ranking on the podcast. If you become a patron, I'll give the chance every week. And that's the case here as well. And but it's going to be a tricky thing, because like, what actually is a rom-com? What qualifies as a classic? What how do you whittle it down from there's hundreds and hundreds of movies to pick from? It's a tricky thing. So we want to hear all of your lists in the comments and on Twitter and everywhere else. So, and on Letterboxd. So check out all of that. And Terry, did you have any kind of criteria or that helped you to kind of whittle it down?
I thought the most important was that I had to enjoy them, whether people consider them classics or not, or if they're really remembered today, because some of these are not obscure, but they kind of fade away. And that was it. I was like, I have to have some joy from these movies.
Yeah, agreed. And I had to overall feel that they were more comedy than drama, because all dramas have some comedy and all comedies have some drama. So what it qualifies as a rom-com. Like for me, I really do like the movie An Affair to Remember, and I had it on the short list for patrons if they wanted to include it. But I actually think that's more of a drama than a comedy.
I saw that on some lists, and I was like, I don't consider that. I even saw the first version of An Affair to Remember on some lists from the 30s, and I was like, I don't feel that those are comedies. So
it's more of a melodrama.
But they're on there. So I don't know why, but they're on there.
Yes. And I also, just because I had so many Cary Grant selections was the sort of catalyst, but I had 4 of his in my top 12 that I was like, you know what? I'm going to institute a separate rule just for myself, just to whittle it down and to make it a more interesting list. I decided that I was only going to include each actor one time. And I did not require this of you, or, so your list didn't need this. It was just the way that I was able to kind of
I pretty much followed that same rule, but I do have 2 Cary Grants. And only because I thought, I want to include the actresses he's working with opposite here. And it was tough because he's the king, definitely, of rom-coms.
I mean, I had, because of my choice, I had to eliminate His Girl Friday, Talk of the Town, The Philadelphia Story, Holiday, Mr. Blanding Builds His Dream House.
So many good ones.
All of those were An Affair to Remember. All were on the short list, and all of them were eliminated. Which is crazy. I think
I know which one you picked. It might be the same one that I picked. Well, one of the two, but it was for him. It was especially difficult.
Yes. And it was a tough cut with Katharine Hepburn. She would be the second one, because I really wanted to include Desk Set, but I already had, because I love that movie and I think it's really funny. But I just already had a Katharine Hepburn, so
same too. As much as I tried, I couldn't just do one Cary Grant, because I wanted to include
Yeah.
an actress that he worked with who was
Yeah.
very much known for comedy. I think she's mostly remembered for drama today, but she's has so many comedies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, like we said, we want to hear your ranking, your list in the comments, or like I said, we're on Letterboxd. Make sure you sign up for there. We're gonna be using that
yeah.
every week for these rankings. So let's dive in. Let's get
Ooh.
started. And so my number 12 is probably my most obscure film on the list. But at the time it was a big hit, and it's Three Smart Girls. This is from 1936, and it starred Deanna Durbin, who at the time was as famous as Judy Garland, if not more
If not,
so.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she had more of a opera style, more of a classical style voice as to Judy's more contemporary style voice.
Yeah.
But she's very talented, very charming. She stopped doing movies earlier than Judy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the reason. But this is a really charming movie about her and her two sisters that go to New York, and they're trying to stop their father from marrying this gold digger and trying to get this kind of a parent trappy kind of a thing. But then you have these little romantic stories for the two, the older sisters, and there's one of my favorite movie kisses in this one where I call it the running kiss, where the sister sees the
Yeah.
love in coming into the doorway, and she runs like literally into him, like running kiss. It is great. It's such a fun, charming little movie that I feel like most people
It
haven't heard
is.
of, that you should check out.
I'd completely forgotten about this one because it's been so long since I last saw it, but it is a charming film,
Mm-hmm.
totally. And Deanna Durbin deserves like more people checking out her films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I should have her Wikipedia or something open, but
yeah,
I
but she
think
retired early, I think. Yeah,
the
so
last movie she made was 1948, it looks like.
so she was out of the spotlight, um, fairly often, and at that
Mm-hmm.
time, it's just the availability too of when your movies re-aired in the theater before
Right.
television,
Mm-hmm.
so to keep you in the mind. But
Yeah. But I mean, I haven't
she's
seen a
got a
ton.
good, yeah, I think she's got a solid list of credits and work. And she was very young when she started as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So in 1946, Durbin was the second highest paid woman
yep.
in the United States, just behind Betty Davis. Her fan
Wow.
club ranked as the world's largest during her active years. So that is just kind of
Isn't
amazing.
it
And
amazing how big stars like that and then people like who, like it
yeah,
was so, it's kind of sad.
yeah, her last movie in 1948. And it says here, unsatisfied by her career options, Durbin chose to retire and move to Paris. And she said, I can't run around being a little Miss Fix-It who bursts into song. The highest paid star with the poorest material. Oh, that's too bad.
Oh, I
But
know. Well,
Three Smart
yeah.
Girls is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
That's the problem with typecasting back then too. You weren't allowed to spread your wings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. People didn't want you to. I mean, that's Judy was able to branch out a little bit,
Yeah, but
but
she had her own demons.
yeah, she sure did. That's for sure. So
So,
retirement certainly was
I mean,
probably
she got to live in Paris. I'm
yeah.
sure she had a great life. Let's be real. Like in the 40s and 50s, must have been amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my first choice. What is your first choice?
Oh boy, my number 12 is probably a very obscure film, probably forgotten, even though it has huge stars in it. It's 1938's Four's a Crowd. It stars
Oh.
Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, Rosalind Russell, Patrick Knowles, and it was directed by one of my favorite classic film directors, Michael Curtiz.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's really like slapstick and funny. It's these couples So Errol Flynn, he plays he's sort of a PR guru. He's got his own firm, but for whatever reason, he also works at a newspaper. And Rosalind Russell is a reporter who works there as well. So they form an attachment. But Patrick Knowles owns the newspaper, and his fiancee is Olivia de Havilland. But it so happens to be that Olivia de Havilland's grandfather is an oil tycoon. And so Errol Flynn is like, hey, man, I'm going to cozy up and charm her. So she gives, good word of mouth to her grandfather so he can hire me as his PR firm, right? That works. That blows up in his face because she then says, oh, you love me. I love you. Breaks off the engagement. And then they spend the whole entire movie running around each other and being in awkward situations. There's this great scene where he's in Olivia's bedroom and he has to hide because everybody comes over. Rosalind Russell, Patrick Knowles, their grandfather. And he's like, I can't be seen in your bedroom because that'll be scandalous. And there's so many winks and nods to the audience because everybody loved the pairing of Olivia de Havilland and Errol Flynn. They made so many movies together. They were great friends in real life. But the movie winks and nods to the audience all the time, going, yeah, we know that you want these two together, but he's going to end up with Rosalind Russell. There's great chemistry. It wasn't much of a success when it was released. I think partly because the pairings did not go the way the audience wants it, but it's still fun, and it's the madcap, zany sort of rom-coms and comedies of the 30s that they did. And
Well,
I don't
this
know,
is really exciting for me. I have never heard of this film.
and it's like Errol Flynn did not do comedy. He wanted to desperately do comedy, but because they gave him a chance to do this movie, because Olivia de Havilland actually has some great rom-coms on her list, as does Rosalind Russell. And Errol Flynn is very good at here, but they were like, because the movie didn't make any money, he was stuck to, you got to do swashbucklers.
Yeah.
You have to, do adventure movies. And so
he
never
was
got it.
in he was
Yeah.
in Robin Hood with Olivia de
With
Havilland.
Olivia. Yeah, they did a total of 8 films together. They were incredibly close in real life, and the public just loved them
And
as a
Captain
movie
Blood.
pairing. Captain Blood, Santa Fe Trail, The
That's
Charge of the Light
exciting.
Brigade. Yeah, they did a lot of movies together. So, like, if you want to see him do comedy, like straight out comedy, not like winks in his movies, but straight out, this one's a good one. And I think it's forgotten,
Yeah. I mean, I
And
never heard of it. And it's not on streaming, so I'm gonna
unfortunately, no. I was trying to make sure a lot of these movies aren't available, but it does play on TCM if you ever get a chance. But some of these I tried really hard, but some of these, because streamers don't like to air
I know.
Old movies. But this is a Warner Brothers movie, so it should show up maybe in the TCM hub on Max or HBO Max, whatever it is.
I'm gonna get the DVD. Eventually. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, I actually have that. I think, I have actually that. I found it fun. I don't know if it's gonna be, but it's just like madcap. It's what you expect from a 30s comedy, and the love quad. And it's because then there's a time too where Errol Flynn's like, wait a minute. Yeah, it's a love quad, because even Errol Flynn's like, wait a minute, Olivia doesn't seem so bad. Rosalind's yelling at me, and there's so many. The ending of that movie it's kind of fourth wall, not to give anything away, but because they know the audience wants Errol and Olivia together, and they make just like a flat out joke about that.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
11 is available, it seems like, on a million streaming services. So it's one of those classics that I guess people that people like to watch, I guess. I don't know. My number 11 is The Quiet Man.
Oh,
John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara. There are some parts of this movie that are outdated.
yeah. Oh, for sure.
But
this movie ranks much higher on my list.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
Yes, it does.
That, like, if you can't sort of shrug off a few outdated things,
yeah,
that's fine. I understand. But it's meant the outdated parts are meant to be kind of over the top and silly. So it doesn't really offend me that much because I don't think it's like making a statement about like spousal abuse or whatever. and like there's a scene where John Wayne drags Maureen O'Hara across the ground. And I mean, doesn't treat her well. But it's meant to be very silly. But it's, for the most part, a really fun, charming little movie about, he plays this boxer who has this past, killed a man in the rink, and so he decides to give up all of that and go to Innisfree, where his ancestral home is, and he meets the fiery redhead. And I guess that's the other reason why it doesn't really bother me, because she's so like strong.
She is so,
she's
like
not
she gives it as good as she gets it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. It's, of course, you need to see it as a movie fan or in order to understand E.T. later on.
So many, there's so many callbacks to so many references. I
mean, literally the scene with the frog from E.T. is he's watching The Quiet Man.
Right.
But yeah, it's very romantic, huge chemistry. They were great friends in real life. And
I've done a few movies together too, as well.
And I mean, I think it's unique amongst. I think it's the only rom-com-ish movie that John Wayne did.
No, he did a few others. Oh, he's not really. Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't. McClintock, which he also did with Marina Hart, but that's a 60s film.
I didn't know those were.
I think so like he's got a few sprinkled out because he's mostly Western and Army guy.
This is, I think, lighter than anything else I've seen.
Oh yeah, this is totally light. Yeah, and directed by John Ford.
And beautiful movie. It still holds up. Lush. And I always say, when people ask me what movie that hasn't been turned into a musical would make a good Broadway musical. Oh my
gosh, yes.
This is one of the top of my list. I think it has all the spots for songs, and it would be
absolutely. And the brawl, the big fight at the end.
Yeah, it could be
really where he fun. Has to. Because she thinks he's not manly enough. Like when. Oh my God, it's so full. It's so, the way she loses, she's about to leave him because he won't collect her dowry. And he's like, we don't need it, and she's so offended by that. And there's a big brawl. It's really funny. It's so lush in color. It was filmed in Ireland. It's so beautiful. If you get to watch the restored version, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where you have it. That's fun.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what do you have next?
Okay, so my number 11 is 1954's The Long, Long Trailer. It stars Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. It was directed by Vincent Minnelli. It was based on a popular novel at the time. It's also a road trip movie. So Lucy and Desi, of course, were big because of the I Love Lucy, and they were a married couple at the time. They were huge. But basically, it's like Lucy and Desi... I can't believe this. They're getting married, and Desi works around the country because he's an engineer. So he has jobs around the country. So Lucy's like, for our honeymoon, and while we travel to your jobs, we can save money by buying a trailer and traveling across the United States while you work at your jobs. And we can save money to buy a proper home and a proper house. Except, of course, once they get the trailer and the car, they're spending more money than what they thought they would. And because it's a road trip movie, everything goes wrong. the trailer tips over. On their wedding night, somebody slips Lucy a sleeping pill. And
Oh,
Desi's
no.
just watching, yeah. And he's like, "Oh, has your wife woken up yet?" And he goes, "Nope, she's still asleep." Like the second day they're married, and Desi's like, "Why would you give her a sleeping pill?" Those sort of sly sort of jokes they got away with then. But it's very much what you would expect from a road trip where people fall in love, they fight, they get back together, shenanigans happen, they meet interesting people. He backs up the trailer. First of all, I don't know how the type of car, I think it's some kind of Corvette, not Corvette, convertible car is a lot is attached to this giant trailer. And I was like, there was no way that car can move this trailer as huge it is. Like he breaks like the whole garage is a carport, I think it is. When he backs up into it, he takes the roof off of it. There's a part where, and of course, because Lucille Ball is a comedic genius, there's a part where she's cooking and he's going up hills, and so the eggs are falling out and things are falling all over her. And so, if you like road trip movies,
Yeah.
this one's good. This might be a little, I don't know if it's obscure, but it might not be one of the movies of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz that they did together that are remembered.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I've never seen, I feel like I've heard of it because I watched the documentary that Amy Poehler did last year at Sundance, and so I think I remember hearing about it there, but I've never seen it, so that's I'll definitely check it out.
They're great together. They had great chemistry. It's like it's not the same as I Love Lucy. It's different because they're different characters. I mean, they're Lucy and Desi, but they're different characters, and it's just like I don't see. This is why I could not live in a trailer, lugging along, because as much as I dream, this is my dream. I would love to travel in an RV in a trailer for like maybe a couple of months, but I know that after a while I would need a home.
Yeah.
And so it gets, the nerves get to split, and
Yeah, I think I have a fantasy of like taking an Airstream for like a long, like a road trip, whatever. But I wouldn't want to do it permanently. I'm not a nomad land person.
Oh, if I was younger, in my younger days, man, I would have done it. I would have done it for like a year, probably. Maybe. Like I would have done it for months. And like now, I'm like 2 months, a week, maybe.
I realized something recently about myself is I like being connected, and maybe it's unhealthy, but I like it. It makes me happy. And when I'm not connected, it stresses me out.
Oh, sure, nothing wrong with
that would be a hard thing for me, of like spotty internet. I would hate that. But my next pick, if I was just going on the best movies and not thinking what are the best rom-coms, this would be maybe number one, because I think it's one of the masterpieces of film. But the romance is more secondary, I would say. But I have at number 10, I have Singing in the Rain.
Oh, I also have that, but it's higher.
Oh, okay. It was a tough one. I mean, the romance is
I get it.
Predominant. It is the romance is important, obviously, to the story. And I think Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds have excellent chemistry. But if I was listing why it's great, it's great because of the incredible songs, the incredible dancing.
Absolutely.
And I think the just outright humor, particularly, and commentary on sort of the movie making business. And I have to say, I absolutely love this as a play, not just as not just as a movie. I've seen it so many times. I just saw it like a couple weeks ago. I've seen it probably 10 times on stage. It's a very good adaptation, in my opinion. It was a movie first, and then adaptation. And I love that. And I just, Lena is hilarious. All the scenes with
the way that they
yes
and the way they try to hide the mics and put it up. I mean, I'm guaranteed people who made that movie were working during the transition, probably, so they they knew that. It's such a fun look at Hollywood poking fun at Hollywood.
And I
But
know it was brutal. Debbie Reynolds has talked about
yeah,
the good morning sequence and how intense that was.
Gene Kelly got sick
Mm-hmm.
with the whole dancing in the rain number because he did it
Oh,
over and over because he
sure.
was a perfectionist as well.
That makes
And
sense.
I know some people harp at the end of that movie with this beautiful dance sequence with
Broadway Melody.
yeah, what is her name now? It escapes me, the
Oh,
actress.
Sid Charisse.
That's it. Like that, yes, Sid Charisse. Can't believe I forgot her name. Like that, it's such a beautiful like number in the
Yeah, well,
end.
one thing you have to understand about Gene Kelly is he was really
Oh, yes.
trying to introduce the world to ballet, like, and to
Absolutely. Yeah.
dance. Like that's why in American Paris and Singing in
Oh,
the Rain
yeah.
have these extended
Extended.
ballets
Yeah.
because it
And
was
I love
part
it.
of his
Yeah.
purpose was that he wanted people to be exposed to it. So it's almost like a sneaky way of kind of like, I'm going to sneak a ballet here
Absolutely.
for you. And I love it too. I think
I love it.
it's
I just think it's so beautiful.
like
They
once
have
I
such
kind of,
good chemistry.
because I'm like a big narrative person. Like I like things to kind of
Yeah.
matter to the plot. But once I kind of learned that like he was really trying to introduce people to dance, I
Yeah.
don't know. I was able to kind of, okay, I was kind of able to treat it sort of like Fantasia in a way. Like this
Yeah.
is just something different. And it didn't
That,
bother me
yeah.
as much that it didn't really matter to the plot.
And that is the beauty of musicals, especially in the 40s and 50s from MGM,
Mm-hmm.
because they had it down. The scope that they would have in their films was just breathtaking. I mean, I saw this movie. I had a chance to see it theatrically
Oh,
when
fun.
back, I think, when they no longer do this anymore since they got bought out. But TCM used to do
Mm-hmm.
the they would have like every month a classic movie.
Still
And
have, I don't
so
know if it's under that name, but I think Fathom
no, it's
Events
I think
still
it's
has,
yeah,
like they just
yeah.
did Grease, I think, last month
Yeah,
or in
they do still
June.
have it. I think it's yeah, I can't remember the new name it was in, but I do
Mm-hmm.
remember that because I lived I made it through traffic. My sister dropped me off through traffic. I almost missed this
That'd
movie.
be so
But
fun.
if I can watch like classic movies like that, I will. And if you ever get a chance to watch this movie on the big screen,
Oh, yeah.
do it because it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just
And just so many incredible song and dance sequences, obviously Singing in the Rain.
the
I
costumings
Make them
are
laugh.
gorgeous. Yeah.
Good Morning. I love You Are My Lucky Star.
Yeah.
The whole sequence is so good at the end.
So
So
great.
yes, it's an amazing film. So what is your number 10?
Amazing. My number 10 is 1949's Neptune's Daughter.
Mm-hmm.
It stars my beloved Esther Williams, Ricardo Montalban, Red Skeleton, and Betty Garrett. This also is a semi-musical. It actually has all four of them singing Baby It's Cold Outside.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so it's I think for Esther Williams fans, they know this movie, there's others that probably people remember her more. But okay, so I love Esther Williams. Like, no matter what movie she was in, there's always the swimming number, of course. But she's an aquatic ballet dancer, and she has a swim line called Neptune. So one day her business partner says, "Hey man, the South American polo team is coming over. We should perform, put on a number for him." Because I don't know how that's going to sell swimsuits, but so be it. And her sister's like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go in search of a polo player and date him." And so she hears about Ricardo Montalban plays Jose. He's the captain, and she's on a mission to go get a date with him. And Esther Williams is like, "Absolutely not. He is a womanizer. No way." But what happens is that Ricardo Montalban gives Red Skeleton a sort of lesson on how to get ladies by speaking Spanish. So Red Skeleton, he pretends to be Ricardo Montalban, and he's fooling the sister by playing records of people speaking Spanish and learning how to speak Spanish like it's him, and she falls for it. Meanwhile, Esther Williams goes up to Ricardo Montalban, and they did many movies together. And one time they played brother and sister, which was hysterical. But And she goes up to him, she goes, "Stop dating my sister." And he's like, "What?" And then he's like, "Hey man, this woman's feisty. I would like to date her." So he plays along. Of course, they start dating and he falls madly in love with her. And then the sister comes going, "I'm engaged to Jose." And she's like, "Excuse me? I thought he stopped dating you." And they don't realize the switch until the men get kidnapped. So there's a kidnapping plot in this movie too that comes out of nowhere. It's to sabotage the polo event. And you're like, what does polo and the swimsuit line? It doesn't matter. It's these characters had great chemistry, and because Red Skeleton is in it, you can expect comedy, and it's just really fun. And the "Baby It's Cold Outside" number is really, because they intercut between both couples singing it, and it's really funny. You can actually see that number on YouTube if anybody's like interested in seeing it, but it's really funny, and everybody looks to be having a good time.
Well, I feel like I am maybe not a classic movie fan because so far I haven't seen any of the movies that you mentioned, which I especially because I love the water, and I mean, I need to.
I don't know how familiar you
one.
are with Esther Williams.
Yeah, I
work.
I know her. I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen any of her
Oh,
movies.
she has some. Oh, you would love it. Absolutely, she invented synchronized the way we see it today in the sports. She invented that.
Yeah,
she championed for that to be an Olympic sport.
Yeah,
and if anybody ever wants to read the best autobiography from a classic film star, pick up Esther Williams' autobiography.
Nice.
It is amazing. I could not put that down. She drops tea like nobody else's business. She's got an incredible story about Joan Crawford in there. I mean, guys, if you love classic movies, you'll love this. I mean, she's not afraid to spill it.
Cool. That's good. All right. Well, my number 9 is one that a lot of people have probably seen the remake, which I love and adore. But the classic, the original, is also great. It's The Shop Around the Corner.
Yeah.
This stars Jimmy Stewart and Margaret Sullivan as your classic. It's the perfumery story, which was the play that all of these have all been based on. And in the story, the two work together. They don't like each other, don't realize that they're actually pen pals, writing each other and falling in love with each other. And that is just a plot that works. It works because the idea of someone falling in, first of all, just the enemies to lovers is great. But the idea of someone falling in love with your words, that is inherently very, very, very romantic.
Very great.
And
Christmas movie too.
Yeah, this is a Christmas movie. There are a few things I actually think I do like You've Got Mail a little bit better, just because I think the suicide in this is just a little weird. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
It just feels like, wow, that was tonally really dark all of a sudden. So that one, that doesn't quite work for me. But other than that, it's charming. It's set in Budapest for some reason because it's Lubish.
Well, the play was.
But but it doesn't have anything to do with the story at all, which is just kind of funny.
You love classic movies for that.
Yeah.
They're just set anywhere with Americans or British people. It doesn't matter. They're all just.
And I just think this is a story that just works. I love She Loves Me on Broadway. It's very underrated. And if you have Broadway HD, you can watch the version with Zachary Levi, which is so charming. Laura Benanti, and there's The Good Old Summertime, which is probably the weakest version, but it's watchable.
I have to say though, if anybody watches that version with Judy Garland and it's Van Helflin, right? That kiss at the end is great though in that one. So if you can withhold through that whole movie to the end, to that kiss, it's pretty good.
Yeah. And Jimmy Stewart is so good in this movie.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful performance. He's so awkward. He's so lovable. And so I do think it's a better, just as far as like pure acting. His performance in Philadelphia Story is great. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like he does the job. There's more to his character. There's more to do as far as his performance. And so Yeah, that's my number 9.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We'd like to take a second and celebrate our sponsor of this episode of the podcast, Baker Bookhouse Publishing, and 3 of their recent releases that will be a perfect end to your summer reading fun. First up, The Secret to Happiness by Suzanne Woods Fisher. Callie Dixon sets her goals and reaches them. So how did this executive chef end up in a small ice cream shop on Cape Cod, sharing a room with her cousin and refusing to set foot in the kitchen? It will take the charm of a young boy and his quiet, steady father to help her find the answers and maybe the secret to happiness. Second, With Every Memory by Janine Roche. After a tragic accident robs her of the last 9 years of memories, Lori Mendenhall comes home to a family completely different than she remembers. As her memory returns and past secrets resurface, it will take all of them to repair what's been broken and find a new future together. Finally, Summer in the Spotlight by Liz Johnson. After a devastating hurricane on Prince Edward Island, Kelsey Ahern sets out to save her beloved community theater and her job. As she draws her friend Levi Ross into her plans for a benefit show, she discovers there's more to him than she expected, and that God's plan for their future are so much more important than the struggles of their past. You can pick up any of these books for 30% off at bakerbookhouse.com or use the affiliate link below. That's bakerbookhouse.com.
So my number 9 is my first Cary Grant pick. It's from 1940 and it's called My Favorite Wife. It's Cary Grant and Irene Dunne.
Yes.
Now this is this completely relies on the charm of Irene Dunne and Cary Grant alone and how they do comedy. Irene Dunne did great comedy. And of course, she had it in her contract where she has to sing a song in every movie she ever did. So that's why so if you ever watch an Irene Dunne movie and you're like, why is she singing in this drama? Well, because it was in her contract. But basically, Cary Grant and Irene Dunne are a married couple. And Irene Dunne is presumed dead. She's been missing for 7 years from a shipwreck. And Cary Grant, he declares her legally dead. It's been 7 years. And he remarries. He's on his honeymoon, or he's going on to his honeymoon, when his wife reappears at the house. Says, "Hey, kids, I'm alive." They remember her, I guess. And then she's like, "My husband's on his honeymoon," off to run to the honeymoon. And in the hotel lobby, he sees her and he's just like, "Excuse me, what's going on here?" He books them in adjoining rooms. He's like, "Give me a minute to tell my new wife. I don't know what's going on here." He cannot tell his new wife what is going on. He is like, she thinks he's having some kind of breakdown, and he tries to explain to her, "No, I've seen my wife." She's like, "Oh no, he's seeing his dead wife." She's like, "He's got to be committed. He needs to see a psychiatrist." Meanwhile, his wife is like, "You don't love me anymore. We've been separated so long." He finds out she was stranded on this deserted island with some hot guy, and they used to call each other Adam and Eve because her name is Eve. I believe, yes. They called Adam and Eve, and he goes, "Oh, hold on. You were stranded 7 years with this guy?" And so she hires a dude, who sells shoes to pretend to be him, but he tracks down the real guy. And then the guy comes back and he's like, "Leave your husband. He's remarried and marry me." And she's like, "I don't know." And he's like, his wife's trying to commit him. Then he gets arrested for bigamy. And he's at the courtroom trying to tell the same judge who declared her dead, remarried him, that no, my wife came back alive. I've been trying to tell my new wife. Oh, she thinks she's yelling at me because I got remarried, but yet she's been frolicking for 7 years with a guy on an island. Like it was her choice. But so there's a lot of shenanigans for them two to find their way back to each other.
Yeah. I've actually seen this.
Yes. I think I'm remembering it correctly.
Yes, it's very funny. I like that all of your picks are really silly, outright.
Yeah.
Like real comedies, which is fun.
Yeah,
this one is very screwball. Very over
very, very much I think just watching him panic and sweat in between trying to tell his new wife and go back to his old wife is just so funny.
It's a good one. Yeah. Well, my number 8 is, I think, maybe a little underrated as far as a musical. It's and I put it ahead of Singing in the Rain, even though I wouldn't say it's better than Singing in the Rain, but I think it's more of a romance than Singing in the Rain. Anyway, who cares where I put it? It's Easter Parade.
Oh, I have that on my list as well.
Oh,
It's
good.
higher.
I absolutely love Easter Parade. I think
Yep.
it's better than White Christmas.
Yep.
Shock
It
and
is.
awe, I think, as far as Urban Berlin musicals, I think this is the best.
It's great.
It has so many great numbers.
Oh yeah.
The A Fella with an Umbrella. I think Peter Lawford is really great in it. It's the kind of the other guy. And
Ann Miller is stellar. Like her dance number.
Oh,
like I love just watching Ann Miller dance.
Yeah.
She was amazing. Yeah.
Agreed. And when there's the whole I was shaking the blues away, of course, is great. There's a whole sequence where he plays drum crazy.
Yeah.
And what he does with his hat in that sequence is
oh my gosh.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And of course,
It's
Fred
so
Astaire,
good. It's so
the
good.
best. We're a couple swells. It Only Happens When I Dance with You. Of course, Easter Parade. Just delightful. I'm just a fella with an umbrella. So I just love this movie. It's so good.
Yeah. Do you know that Gene Kelly was originally supposed to do this movie?
Oh, really? I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So because Fred Astaire was sort of semi-retired by this point.
Uh-huh.
And Fred Astaire was supposed to do this movie and he hurt his foot and he couldn't do it. And he's like, you know what? I'm calling up Fred. And he's like, Fred, come back and do this movie. And Fred Astaire was like, I don't know. Because there is a bit of an age difference between Fred Astaire and Judy Garland, but you don't care when you watch this movie.
No.
Because they're so
it works.
It works. The chemistry is there.
Yeah, it's not like Daddy Longlegs where it's like, oh, that's a big age,
right?
You know, like it's a little weird.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean the plot is just like fine.
This
basically
movie,
like Ann Miller plays his big dance partner.
Yeah,
and she dumps him at the beginning of the movie, and so he needs
and wants Peter Lawford like real bad, his best friends.
Yeah, and so then he picks somebody says, oh, you act like you could dance with anybody, and so he sees Judy Garland. He's like, well, I could make her into my partner, basically.
Yep.
And so he picks her, and of course they end up falling for each other, and it's really fun.
It's so much fun. It's so fun. And
yeah.
Sure.
And it's nice to have one movie. I mean, there's others, I guess, but it's the most with Judy that's just like pure joy.
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
Even Meet Me in St. Louis, which I love, is more. It has more drama, mixed in.
It is, but like, I know that I kind of like I put that on my short list, but I leaned more towards Easter Parade because out of all her musicals, Easter Parade is my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, same. All right. What's your number 8?
Okay, so my number 8 is also a musical. It's a period piece. Listen, this has not aged well. I will be the first one to say it, but it's 1958's Gigi. Another movie directed by Vincent Minnelli. It stars Leslie Caron, Maurice Chevalier, and it has a small role with Ava Gabor. Ava Gabor. Basically, the premise of this movie is that Maurice Chevalier plays Gaston. And, he's a rich, bored guy. He's a womanizer. He goes out and he dates Ava Gabor, and then he dumps her and she commits suicide. And his uncle's like, oh, don't worry. You lived through your first suicide. And I don't know why any of this is funny in the moment when you watch it, but I just eat this movie up. But so he befriends this Gigi, and I'm going to assume she's in teenage age, but I'm not 100% sure she's full into the teenager age, but she lives with her grandmother. He becomes friends with her. She's in love with him. He doesn't realize he's in love with her. Eventually, they come up with a scheme to make her to sort of give this great remake to Gigi, so she looks more adult, so she can be his courtesan, basically to be his mistress. And then, of course, he does not like that. He's like, I don't like you like this, Gigi. I liked you before. And then he's all mad about the whole prospect. But then he realized, you know what? I do like this woman. So he goes back and he's like, yes, you can be my official mistress. And she gets so upset. Like, I can't believe if you liked me, you wouldn't ask me to be my mistress. And he goes, fine, don't be. He storms out. Later on, she's like, you know what? If I'm going to be miserable, I'll be miserable with you. And I was like, excuse me? There's so many things. So then he makes her into, he takes her out officially. That's his courtesan, and he does not like how people treat her because she's a mistress, and that was big in this time period. I think it takes place someplace in France. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Long story short, he goes home and he realizes, you know what? I can't have this woman be a mistress. I love you, be my wife. They sing a couple of songs in between all of this. The costumes are beautiful. The Thank Heaven for Little Girls is a big song from that. And
it's interesting because I don't even think of this as a rom-com.
Oh, you didn't? I do think of it as a rom-com because it is so funny, especially when they fight. Well, if you liked me, you wouldn't pick me as your mistress. And
maybe it's the mistress element that.
Oh yeah, it's the courtesan. It's
why.
so crazy because then he goes, because then he likes her and he's like, yes, you can be my courtesan because that's how they say it.
Yeah.
But we'll just be like on a friend level,
Uh-huh.
And then she gets like, okay, I will accept that. And then she's like, but if you, and then when he confesses he loves her, she's like, if you really loved me, I wouldn't be your courtesan. And he said he can't win with her. It is so weird. I know this movie has not aged well. There are people who love this movie and there are people who passionately dislike it. And if you're a feminist, you probably can't watch this movie 100%. It's like, it is. I know. I was like, I'm putting this on my list because I love this movie. The whole thing was like, literally the uncle goes, you survived your first suicide, like, because he discarded a lover. It is so like, excuse me, but you can't help but laugh in that moment. I remember when my brother was first watching this movie, he was like, he just busted out laughing, going, I know I shouldn't, but I am because of the line delivery. And the level of that, I
don't remember hating it. I just remember thinking it was a little
it's not.
boring.
It's not for everybody's taste. It's a little long, but
it's an interesting Best Picture winner, that's for sure.
For sure, but it's very. It is to me. I just find it all so incredulous.
Yeah,
and probably closer to real life than anything we've seen in these movies. With courtesans and all that stuff. It's based on a novella.
Yeah.
But like, I just have fun with it.
Sure. Well, my number 7 is, I don't know if it's underrated. I have no idea. It's Mr. Deeds Goes to Town.
Yeah.
Is my number 7. Love this movie. It's Frank Capra, and I love almost all his movies that I've seen. I also, I love Jean Arthur. She's one that I could have put a bunch on. I don't think she made a bad movie.
No.
And this I could see some people saying it's not that much of a rom-com. I debated, but I think the romance is pretty important. But basically it's about this guy. He's like super simple and he ends up inheriting this fortune and he has to move to the big city. And so he hates everything about it.
Naturally.
Fancy life, which is really funny. And Jean Arthur plays this woman who kind of comes along, is gonna like the big city girl, gonna teach him how to live and all this stuff. And of course he ends up teaching her, and
right.
It is so charming, this movie.
It is.
Yeah.
Been a long time since I've seen it, so I didn't have much of a memory of it.
Yeah. So and Gary Cooper's super charming in it. It's
always,
it's a really fun one. And if people have seen, there is an Adam Sandler remake of Mr. Deeds.
Oh, the one with Winona Ryder, right?
Yes.
Which I didn't totally hate.
Yeah.
I didn't totally hate. Yeah, it's true. I didn't totally hate that one.
So what do you have for 7?
So my number 7 is The Prince and the Showgirl from 1957. It stars Marilyn Monroe and Laurence Olivier. This was directed by Olivier. It is a period piece, but it's also a royal movie. And I don't know if people remember this much. If you ever saw that movie with Michelle Williams, My Week with Marilyn, which is a questionable, it's based on a book by a guy who worked on this movie production. It's questionable because people question whether any of that stuff really happened or if he's, exaggerating the truth what happened. But it was a very troubled production. Marilyn was going through it. Of course, today we have more compassion and understand Marilyn as a person than they did back then. Like we understand her troubles. Poster. It is really hot when they are dancing together. I think that despite all the trouble that behind the scenes, that it ended up being really well. And they have really good chemistry. And it's really funny because them getting together, basically she is like 2 to 3 days with this family and never changes the same dress because in circumstances she's always there. And the Dowager Queen is like, oh, you should really think of a new look because she doesn't realize she hasn't changed her dress. But essentially, Olivier plays the Prince Regent of a fake country. He travels to England for the coronation of George V. He travels with his 16-year-old son, who happens to be king, who will be officially king in like 18 months or something like that, and with his mother-in-law. And so, like, he goes to a nightclub. He sees Marilyn Monroe perform. He's like, oh, she's nice. He sends her like an invitation to join him for dinner. She thinks it's a party and it's just a dinner between them two. And she's like, you can't, I don't like to be wooed this way. You have to be romantic. So he brings in violin, all this stuff. He cancels the plans. He yells at people. He brings in violinists. They end up dancing. But their evening gets interrupted a lot because he has to go deal with these meetings. He like gets a clue that the Germans are trying to overthrow him. Anyway, the evening ends. She gets so drunk she passes out, and he's disgusted by this. He goes, I can't believe this woman passed out before we could essentially seal the deal, right? So he calls the servants. His servants are lugging her up like she's a piece of furniture to like a room. And she falls asleep. When she wakes up the next morning, she meets like his mother-in-law, and she's like, oh, honey, my lady in waiting is sick. You come with me to the coronation. And she's like, for real? So she hears a plot of his son who's trying to overthrow his father. He's in cahoots with the Germans. They go to this coronation, and he's like, what are you doing here? She puts on like a little hat and like a cape to change her dress and a little bit to modify it. Essentially, she ends up going to the ball. They dance together. Marilyn is like, oh, I gotta fix this father and son relationship and end this potential, takeover of the country, which she successfully does because she's Marilyn Monroe. But at the end of the movie, I find it very sweet, and it's sort of ambiguous because they have fallen completely in love with each other. Mm-hmm. But he has to go back home, and he's like, my tenure will be up in a matter of months, as will her singing contract. And he wants to take care of her. He's going to take care of her financially because he loves her so much. But they both say to each other, we know that so much stuff can happen in the months that we'll be separated. And the movie just has this sweet parting where like you either believe they'll get back together or that they never will. Mm-hmm. But that's it. I think they're both very charming. Marilyn Monroe is always charming. Yeah. She looks amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
And he is very funny.
Uh-huh. Well, I would just like to say I have seen a lot of movies. I have over 4,500 logged on Letterboxd, and this is another one I have not seen. I just don't want the listeners to be like, "Wow, Rachel's a film critic."
There's too many to see them all. There's too many classics, and I think this one is actually. I think it's gained resurgence later on
that makes
in
sense.
years, but this one is really kind of like a forgotten in the filmography. It didn't do really well. It's not one of Marilyn Monroe's, better money-making movies. This was her first and only, I believe, movie she made with her production company. And this was a very turbulent point in her life. Like her marriage with Arthur Miller was falling apart, and she had her second miscarriage. There was a lot of stuff going on with her. So despite this not being an essentially happy time for her, and how hard it was to film this movie, and like Olivier just could not handle her. And
Yeah.
so, but they somehow managed to pull it off with each other. I really like it. It's not for everybody, but it's just a fun royal movie.
Well, and I do have every month I do on my blog, I do a blind spot where I review I try to mix it up and have some be like art house films, some classic cult film, cult classics. I have some blockbuster classic, all different ones. And so I do that. I've been doing it since 2016. So I'm almost at my 100th blind spot review, so that's fun. So I'll have to add these to the list.
Yeah, I mean, I find it fun.
It's great. I love hearing about movies I haven't seen.
It's pretty funny because he was still married to Vivian Leigh when he directed this.
Yeah.
And everybody was excited to work with Marilyn, but then, it went south. But she was on set a lot because she was afraid Olivier and Marilyn might have an affair.
Oh, okay.
Well, so she was like, I got to keep an eye on my man.
Well, my next choice, my number 6, also has Marilyn Monroe in it, and it is How to Marry a Millionaire.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much fun. I think
So
a lot of Hallmark movies can kind of go back to a lot of things in this movie. You have Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, Lauren Bacall. They decide to rent this flat in this fancy part of town in the hopes that they will run into rich men so that they can get married. They don't have any furniture in the house. They don't because they just are there to be seen.
Yep.
And Marilyn Monroe tries to play a nerd in this, which is really funny.
Her glasses. All you need to be a nerd is glasses.
Yeah, glasses.
Oh, and she cannot see when she.
Yeah, like she tries to go without her glasses, and she's just a mess. She can't see at all. And Lauren Bacall, of course, is stunning. She's always stunning. She's stunning in this, and of course they all end up meeting men who aren't millionaires or don't appear to be millionaires. And this is another one that if somebody asked me to write a musical based on a movie that's not a musical, I think this one would be really good.
Yeah. This I had 3 Marilyns to pick from. It was the one I chose. I wanted to choose the one that I love them all, but I was like, let me go with the Prince and the Showgirl because I feel like that's more just about them. But like I also had Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which I also love. So this was a hard cut. And I love the scene where she can't see in the airplane and she puts on her glasses and she meets the guy who also has glasses and they fall in love because they wear glasses.
Yeah. I mean, and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, I actually just covered that on the Criterion Project show that I do. So I just watched that a couple of months ago.
I love that
fun.
one.
Yeah, it's a fun one. So what do you have at 6?
So my number 6 is 1957's Love in the Afternoon. It stars Gary Cooper and Audrey Hepburn. It's directed by Billy Wilder. This might be another movie that hasn't aged that well, because there is a significant age difference between them, but that is played into the story. They're not pretending like it doesn't exist. There's a lot of romantic moments in this. There's the beautiful moment at the end on the train and the rowboat, and they had excellent chemistry. But essentially is Audrey Hepburn is she's a young, I wouldn't say she was a teenager. She's probably young adultish, and she's a cello. She plays the cello. She lugs that cello everywhere she goes. I don't know how she hides that. What's funny about it too is the ways she hides her cello so Gary Cooper never sees it. But her father's a private investigator, and he investigates cheating spouses. And she overhears a client of his saying, I'm going to kill Gary Cooper. And she's like, oh, I can't, she's always investigating in her father's files, reading the tantalizing stuff. But she's like, I can't let a murder, go by. So she tries to call the police, and the police goes, we can only help if there's a murder, going on. And so she runs to the hotel to stop it, and she does. And it's so funny because the husband comes in ready to kill Gary Cooper, but he's sitting there with Audrey Hepburn, and his wife was climbing out the window. The man's wife is climbing out the window. She never tells him the name. He sees the letter A, so he tries to guess all her names. She plays off that she's kind of a worldly woman doing him a favor. I believe a year passes on when she spots him again at the opera, and she pursues him, and he's very intrigued about. There's just something about her that he's so intrigued with. Like no woman has intrigued him like her, and she starts naming all her former lovers, but they're all clients that her father had investigated. And I think finally Gary Cooper's like, I got to get this woman investigated. And the father's like, excuse me. He starts putting two to two together because the father's the investigator. And he eventually says, that's my daughter. And I don't think this will work out. And so there's this it's a heartbreaking breakup. When you watch these romance movies, rom-com or whatever, there's always like that potential breakup moment. And it's like, Audrey Hepburn's chasing after him, like when he's on the train, and she's like, doesn't matter, because he never tells her he knows the truth. And she goes, I'll find other men and I'll be fine. And she breaks down and he can't take it. And he swoops her in. I mean, spoiler alert, I'm sorry, but it's such a like romantic scene when he swoops her on the train and he calls her by her real name, like the jig is up. And you just, even though there's an age difference between them, you buy it. They have good chemistry together. And Audrey Hepburn is lovely as she always is. And it's just silly. The way she chugs that cello around everywhere with her, because she's always heading off to practice. And she's like, yes, I will meet you for drinks. She's hiding it under tables and corners, so he never notices the cello. So
I have seen this one. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So I don't remember it super well.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarkie in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
But we should mention that, so the director, Billy Wilder, he did The Apartment, and a lot of people would have that on their list, but we kind of both decided that we feel it's not really a rom-com.
No, because I think that movie's too heavy.
Yeah. It's, like I said, all dramas have some comedy, all comedies have some drama, but that one has mostly drama.
I know. It's like it's a heavy story, and I'm like, I don't know.
It's very heavy.
Based on...
It's great. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
but
it is. It's based on a sort of true story.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's another whole thing we could go into. But
well, my number 5 also has Audrey Hepburn, and it is Roman Holiday. Of course, is my number 5.
Yeah.
Love this film. Such wonderful chemistry. So many iconic scenes between Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. The ending is pitch perfect and brave. That would they have the courage to make that ending now? But it's just like they just had this moment that together that was perfect. It's really, I mean, you can tell. I mean, when I say this, you can tell it was Audrey Hepburn's first real role, in like a good way, just in the sense she's just so charming and natural, and it feels authentic. The performance feels very, very authentic. And perfect casting. Even the way she talks, she feels like a princess.
Totally. It's a fun movie, but I think I enjoy Loving the Afternoon just a little bit more, so that's why I went with that one, because this one was a hard one to choose also, to like get off the list.
Well, the other thing too about Roman Holiday, not only was it so influential, but also it just it's so much fun even just seeing Rome, and totally. All of those iconic sites, and so it's fun on that level. Still holds up, still entertaining. So what do you have a 5?
My 5 is Easter Parade.
Yeah. Okay, good. Do you have you want to say anything else about it?
No, I think we covered it all. It's just it's great.
Well, my number 4 is Pillow Talk. Rock
Yep.
Hudson,
Yeah.
Doris Day. Of course, I'm a huge Doris Day fan.
Yeah.
One of the very first videos I ever did on my other channel was my video about, I had 3 different box sets of Doris Day
Oh yeah.
movies that I was reviewing, DVD reviews. I mean, that was the thing
Yeah.
when that's how long I've been doing this. And
Hold on to those, because who knows if you'll ever get to see these streaming or anything like
yeah,
that.
exactly. I love Pill Talk. It's so funny.
It
It's
is. It's
poking
great.
fun at the whole genre. I mean, everything in it is so ridiculous. I mean, Rex Stetson and his
It's the best film they did together too.
Yeah, the apartment that she makes for him is hilarious. Again, it kind of ends similar to the Quiet Man. You kind of have to take it as a little bit screwball, a little bit silly, over the top. When he carries her through the apartment. You have Thelma Ritter as who knows why Doris Day has her own maid, a full-in housekeeper. She's a single woman. Like, doesn't really make sense.
She lived in a great apartment too, so
Yeah, like, why does she need full-time housekeeping? I don't know, but you gotta love Thelma Ritter. She's great in the role, and Tony Randall makes a great other guy.
Yep. He's so great in this movie.
Yeah, he's wonderful. They had wonderful chemistry.
Yep, they did.
It's just a genuinely really funny movie, and
it is
so
totally.
It had to make my number 4. What about you? What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Singing in the Rain.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
it's so good. I mean, it's one of the greats. All right. Well, my number 3 is one of the classics, often imitated. It Happened One Night.
That's my number 3 too.
Okay, good. Clark Gable, Claudette Colbert, director Frank Capra again.
Yep.
Your classic enemies to lovers, forced proximity. She's this society girl who wants to rebel from her dad, so she decides to marry this man she doesn't love, just as a rebellion. And she sneaks
after her
away.
money.
Yeah. She sneaks away, and she ends up on this bus, sneaking away, and she ends up meeting this reporter, played by Clark Gable, and they have this really great banter back and forth.
Absolutely.
It's so good. Why did you have it on your list?
This is a pre-code, because it's a 34, so it made it just before the Hays Code came out. So you have all these classic moments where she lifts up the hem of her skirt and the walls of Jericho with the blanket covering, and that is so much homage. Like, if you're a Luke and Laura fan from General Hospital and you remember the early in the romance when they were on the run from the left-handed boy, and you know that they did a whole walls of Jericho between the both of them. So that was a lovely homage. But this movie is just so fun. And like, I don't even care that Clark Gable is like essentially blackmailing Claudette Colbert, like, hey, if you don't give me this interview, because he desperately needs a job, I'm going to tell your dad where he is.
Yeah.
And then of course the misunderstandings and all the shenanigans that they end up, because it's a road trip movie as well. So if you like those type of like romance movies where they're on the road and they meet interesting characters, and there's so much chemistry and it sizzles, and they get, it's a pre-code, so they got away with a lot more stuff. It's just great. It's a classic for a reason. I think it's one of the better films of the 1930s, for the early 1930s, I should say, regardless of whether you think it's a rom-com. It's just so well put together.
I mean, how could someone not consider it a rom-com?
I don't know how. I mean, with the stuff that they go through,
it's very much
the car alone, like all the stuff with the car alone.
Well, my number 2 is one of the, I think my number 2 is a movie that all Hallmark fans should be grateful for, because I think it is the ancestor to everything that we know and love. It is Christmas in Connecticut.
Oh yeah.
I love this movie. It's hilarious. It's very broad, very silly. But you have Barbara Stanwyck, and she's this is the reason why I didn't have the Lady Eve on my list, which is a movie I
Right.
love. And because she's also in that. And anyway, she plays this woman who tells the big lie, like we see so often in these films, and in Hallmark, that we see so often in these Hallmark films. And she tells this lie that she is like the perfect homemaker. And this movie was made in 1945, so it was right in the middle of the war. And that she's the perfect homemaker, that she has, the kids and the farm and just everything. And she writes this column. Well, there's this soldier who reads days and comes home, and he wants to have like the perfect Christmas in Connecticut. Meanwhile, she lives in Manhattan and doesn't know how to do any of this stuff. Well, they tell her, like, you have to fake it. As we've seen so many times in these movies. You have to pretend. And there's this guy that's really interested in her that she hasn't been interested in, but he has this house in Connecticut, and so she agrees to pretend to be married to him.
Oh my gosh.
So that they can put on this facade in this house. And they get there, and the funniest part, there's so many funny parts, but the funniest part is that they have the women that work in the factory of the town bring their babies for her every day. And so every day it's a different baby.
Oh my
and the
gosh,
soldier
I know.
is like, this is a different baby.
No, it's not.
No, you're right.
No, I mean, it's great. Yeah.
Hilarious. And really iconic scenes, like when she learns how to make pancakes, and because the chef tries to teach her how to make
classic Christmas movie too.
Yeah, it's
classic
They've
Christmas
got
movie.
the rides in the sleigh, and with falling snow, and just all the tropes that we know now were introduced in this movie.
Very true.
I mean, you do have a slight awkwardness because he thinks that she's married with children.
Oh, I know.
He's falling for her. He's so confused.
Unbelievable. Have you ever seen the remake?
Funny.
Did you ever see the remake?
I have. And it was okay, as I recall.
Yeah. I mean, it's directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is crazy. But if anybody heard our last ranking episode, you know that I have the ranking episode for the Christmas in July movies. You know, I have a thing for Chris Christopherson. So he's in that remake if anybody ever wants to check it out. By the way, I told my brother that, and I think he was amazed and disgusted at the same time. He's like, Chris Christopherson?
Well, maybe one of these days we'll have to do a Christmas in Connecticut episode just to talk about both of them. It is fun. That would be fun.
The premise of this movie is fun, and you are 100% correct in that Hallmark should be thankful that this premise exists, because they have many like it.
And on my Letterboxd, I have it in my favorite films, just because I feel like it kind of summarizes everything that I love.
Absolutely.
Even though I don't have a number one on this list. I have it at 2.
I love it too.
It's not love it.
Yeah, I love it too. It's not on my list, but I mean, this was a hard list to put together. It
was very difficult. What do you have at 2?
The Quiet Man.
Okay. Yes, you had high.
I had it high. I love this movie. Oh, come on, that kiss in the rain.
Oh, it's so good.
Like that alone makes it go up to 20. Like, you can't, that's it. And the way it's shot and framed, it's like, oh my, you know, like, woo, it's great.
Yeah, it's so good. All right, well, my number one of the funniest movies ever made, one of the best movies ever made, it's the one that took out Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. The rest of this list is Bringing Up Baby. Hilarious.
It is my number one as well.
Oh,
yeah, directed by Howard Hawks.
Yes.
And it's just unbelievable. It is, I think for me, it's the funniest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like nonstop laughing. It's this and an episode of I Love Lucy where they keep walking around with, like, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's like, it's a small tree, and then the tree goes bigger and bigger until they're lugging around like this giant tree in a pot. And that makes me laugh so much. And this movie makes me laugh just the same way. So those are the funniest things I've ever seen.
When he's losing it over the clothes.
I know. And because like, it's
like,
so weird.
To her aunt, he's like,
my gosh.
do you think I like dressing like this?
Oh my, and you know, it's so funny because the movie starts off and you're like, I love you, Cary Grant, but I don't know if I can believe you're a paleontologist. You know, like, excuse me, what a career choice, you know, like for him to play, but he pulls it off so much. And I really like Katharine Hepburn here. And this might make people clutch their pearls, but I don't think Katharine Hepburn becomes a really great actress until over 50. Until her later films. I think her movies in the 30s and 40s are okay. She is good in them. She is serviceable in them. But I think she really gets into her own and her ability, where some of the best performances she has is over the age of 50 in her later movies of the 50s and the 60s and so forth. But she is good here, just playing a klutz, a scattered brain.
Just a total mess. Like everything she does is a disaster.
It's everything. And why does she have to lie when they get arrested? And she thinks he's a zoologist, and they're chasing that cat everywhere, you know, from poachers or whatever like that. And it's crazy, you know. It's like, you're like, what is this movie about? But it works. It works so much. It's just so funny.
It is so funny.
So
and
funny.
He's like a boiling pot that just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter.
Oh my gosh, it's like he cannot take. And the end is great, but he was very restrained when he's been working his years putting that dinosaur skeleton together. Oh, and the dog, right, stealing his missing bone and burying it. His life's work ruined in a matter of minutes.
So it's about, for people that haven't seen it, it's about Cary Grant plays this paleontologist who gets the final bone for his big dinosaur thing at the museum that he runs, and he's going to get this big grant. Well, he ends up running into the Katharine Hepburn, who plays this heiress person. And so he's like trying to impress her at first, and she like latches onto him, and she has a pet leopard that she named Baby that she needs to take care of, and things just get ridiculous. And there's even like little scenes that are mined for such humor, like when she takes his car, she steals his car.
Yeah, it's all to trap him because he's getting married. Remember, he's engaged, and she's fallen in love with him, and she's like, "No, I want this man." She steals his clothes, you know. That's why he ends up wearing her robe. And the aunt is a big donor to the museum.
It's like, I'm completely gay, which is really, when you know Cary Grant, like, it's hilarious, that whole scene. But I love that scene when she steals his car.
Oh my gosh!
And he's like, "You're in my car," and she's just like.
Because at a moment she just decides, I love this man. Like after a few moments, like he can't get married. He doesn't really love that woman. And of course, you know how it's going to end. But the lengths she goes to keep him from going to his wedding.
Yeah,
crazy.
It's so good. It's so good. It's so one of the greats. So there we go. Let's go over that's amazing. Out of hundreds of films to pick from, that we ended up with the same number one.
Yeah, because it's the best. It really is. If you haven't watched it, see it. Criterion has a great release of it. So it is available for anybody who wants to check it out. Yeah.
Well, let's see. For the patrons, we just had one response. Stephanie Walker, she says that she would include That Touch of Mink. I love anything with Doris Day or Cary Grant. 2 Weeks with Love, she says, and Move Over Darling is a good one too.
Oh, you know what? I forgot about That Touch of Mink. Yeah.
I've never seen 2 Weeks with Love, but
I don't. That's just not bringing. That
Jane,
doesn't like
Jane Powell, Debbie Reynolds, Ricardo Montalban. Interesting cast.
Boy, when I was a kid, because I watched a lot of classic movies when I was a kid. With my parents and stuff, I loved me Ricardo Montalban. So I watched every episode of Fantasy Island when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, in Move Over Darling is technically 1963, so maybe our next one we can include that. And let's see, That Touch of Mink. When was that? Let me see.
Madison, I
That's
thought that
also
was
1962. So
I did think that
okay,
was a
so
60s
next
movie,
one,
yeah.
it could be
Next one.
included, but
That's going to be hard for me. Like,
yeah, that one's going to be
to-
fun. And so yeah, so join the Patreon. You can be part of our ranking episodes, and also every single Sunday I do a AFI Passions review that's just for the patrons, exclusive review, that part of the AFI 100 Passions list. So I'm at number 57, 58, I think, this week. So getting through it, and a lot of these ones we talked about have been on that list. So definitely it's a nice perk for being a patron. All the information to be patrons will be in the description. So you definitely should please check it out. We really need your help. And this was so much fun. We'd love to hear your lists. And Terry, where can people find you?
I am at Twitter, or X, however you want it, at Flurry Heaven. I'm also at Letterbox, same exact handle.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure that you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod, Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews 5 stars. We got an amazing review this week, and it totally brightened our day. So please check that out. And then also, if you are listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Most of our viewers on YouTube are not subscribers. So if you're in that camp, please subscribe. It really helps us with the algorithm a lot. So please subscribe. And thanks so much. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.